Hi, Dave.
Hey, Delphine.
Welcome to my circle.
So happy to be in your circle. I felt like I've been in your circle for a while, but now I'm officially in your circle.
The circle's getting smaller.
The smaller circle.
Yeah. Well, we had to jump through a little bit of scheduling hoops to have you here, but nothing is too big of a hurdle because I am so excited to have you here and talk to you about all that's going on in your life.
Thank you for being flexible. Sorry for my schedule. It's a bit of a circus right now.
It's okay. I know you successful people. That's what happens. So just to let everybody know how we know each other, because it's actually kind of funny. You're literally my next door neighbor in Laguna.
For a lot of years.
Yeah. We both sold our houses on good old Flamingo Road.
We did. I mean, it's a beautiful spot, great views, but sometimes it's fun to shift gears.
Yeah. Do you miss Vandahala?
Vandahala? Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is we bought, where we moved to these cottages in Woods Cove, and we're working on a historic remodel. But we really wanted to be right at the water because I like to get my gills wet every day, get in there, and going up and down the hill, definitely 1% or first world problem, but still a problem.
Yeah.
So
slowed you down a bit.
Yeah. It's
longer to get to the water.
Love being down at the water. Love where the zone we're in Woods Cove, and I'm in the water like 3 times a day. Just love it. Yeah. So it's kind of it's been a nice shift, nice change.
Woohoo.
Yeah.
Well, let me introduce you for those people who may not be familiar with your face. You are the founder and CEO of Excess Energy Drink. It's a portfolio of energy drinks and nutritional supplements, right?
Yeah, sports nutrition and energy drinks. Yeah.
It generated over $2 billion in revenue.
Yeah, that was some historical information. I think that company now is close to $500 million in revenue per year. So it's really rocking.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
It's grown quite a bit over the years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. Over 1 billion cans sold, I've heard.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And plus, and counting. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, pretty cool. That's amazing. I have tried your drinks a couple times. They're delicious. They're really good. I'm not an energy drink girl. I hate Red Bull and Monster, but yours was really good. And I love that it was sugar-free.
Thanks. Yeah. We were first we were the first ones to do sugar-free back in 2001. The first ones to do flavors, first ones to use mega doses of B vitamins. So you get this healthy lift that lasts for hours. And a number of companies copied different elements of that. 5-Hour did the B12. Red Bull copied our sugar-free instead of, prior to that, people would call them drinks diet when they had no sugar. Our whole theory was there's a gap in the customer experience you wanted to solve. Most people don't like the way energy drinks taste, at least at first. Maybe they acquire that taste later, but not at first. Most people don't like the empty calories. They're loaded with sugar. It's like 200 calories per can typically. And it's that rocket ship ride straight up and then straight down, the crash that we were also trying to avoid. And ultimately, I wanted something that I could drink every day or that my family could drink every day. So we were trying to make something healthier. Is it the perfect, most healthy drink on earth? Probably not. It's not. Some people have different definitions.
I think that's water.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But we think it's actually really good for you. It has a lot of great benefits. And I was really happy to be a part of that brand, from the founding through our sale in 2015. And then, I ran it for 3 years for Amway, who we sold it to through that earnout. And we really maxed all of our KPIs and had a great exit. So it was a great ride, great journey. Love the people that I worked with. Very friendly exit. It was great for Amway, who bought it from us. Great for my partners and I. And now we're on to other things. So it's fun.
So when I tell people, though, about Excess Energy Drink, actually very few people have heard of it for such a
big brand.
Brand. Why is that?
It's funny. We were sold in over 60 countries. I still are. It's sold through an alternate channel. So I got involved in that brand to help turn it around, to help fix it. With the person who put all the original money in and still owned half of it through the final sale, Josh Bradbury. And the funny thing was, when you're trying to go into traditional retail sales with beverages, it's a very crowded space. It's hard to break through, and it's very expensive to build. So one of the things we were looking for is how do we create a kind of a disruptive brand, do something that's different in the category. I didn't want to just compete head to head with Red Bull. I just thought that was a poor strategy overall. But more importantly, then I started saying, well, how do we find a disruptive channel? Like how do we, 2001, 2002, we were just coming out of the dot-com crash. Atkins diets and kind of low sugar, low carb diets were becoming more popular. And I had owned a Red Bull distributorship as part of the dot-com revolution. It was part of a larger dot-com business that I was helped start. And I guess from what we saw, that gap in experience, even when we gave it away, I thought there was a big opportunity to transform the experience of using an energy drink, the experience of using sports nutrition, make it taste great, take those empty calories out of it so you feel good about using it, and then give you a better energy lift experience. That was all really important. But then how do we get that story, which is a much bigger story than you can tell with a shelf talker, out into the market? How do we kind of distribute to an audience that we could reach separate from the people that Red Bull is going to reach? Those were all questions going through my mind. Hard to find those channels, but I did know something about the Amway business and about direct selling or multi-level marketing, network marketing. There wasn't a lot of success with beverages in that category. And so we kind of looked there for a way to see if we could figure that out. And that became sort of the channel we went after. We went exclusive with Amway in 2003. And then, we grew so fast that they had to buy us, and that was a good thing.
So how does somebody get started in the energy drink business anyway? I mean, you had some past experience, because I remember when we were talking about Kangen water one time, you told me you had actually done a lot of work in the water business as well. So how did that start?
Well, I got a degree in philosophy, and nobody was hiring philosophers, so I had to figure something else out. And
I keep telling my kid that.
yeah, right. No, but so I started out in business fairly early. I worked in think tank. I also got a degree in political science, did a lot of work in politics and economics, worked for a few think tanks, and sort of got tired of that and decided that I wanted to make a shift, and got hired to do an economic marketing campaign out in the Napa Valley for a beverage alcohol laboratory, ETS Labs. And that was successful. I ended up running, the public side of that business, and learned a lot about beverages, learned a lot about beer, wine, distilled spirits, and, kind of the chemistry behind beverages. And that led me, I kind of transitioned out of that into more tech work, but ended up owning a Red Bull distributorship, and as part of the more of the tech work that I was doing. And so when I was looking for an opportunity, the dot-coms melted down. I ended up as a CTO up in Seattle. I was looking to get out of Seattle because I really don't care for the weather, and found a nutrition company in Southern California that needed a lot of help. I started out helping them with their website and some of the things that they were doing in the early 2000s with e-commerce, and then ended up becoming the COO, a director in the company, and really being involved in turning around that business and helping them think differently about how you sell. At that time, it was low glycemic sports nutrition, so low sugar, low starch sports nutrition. And they had powders and bars, but everybody had powders and bars. And I said, we've got to do something really unique and special. We got to attract people to our brand. And that's only going to happen if we're doing something that you can't get someplace else. Mm-hmm. And so the white space that I thought made sense, especially at that time, was energy drinks, fastest growing beverage category. Everything in the space was unhealthy. It was basically Red Bull and a bunch of Me Too companies. Mm. And so from the company we were coming from and the place that we were kind of operating out of, the thought was, how do we do something that's a diet energy drink, but has a great experience? Diet means it tastes terrible, right? And so how do you say that without saying diet? So we said sugar-free. We got to zero sugar, zero carb claims. Had a great flavor formulator partner. Still talk to him today about a lot of projects, and really kind of changed the game. And I think did something very different, special, and unique. And that kind of led me into the beverage business, and then more and more sports nutrition. But so that's kind of how I ended up there. Long story, but it's definitely a pathway.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting story. So you sold your company in 2015 to Amway.
Yep.
You had already been distributed through Amway. So was that always the exit strategy?
It ended up becoming more or less the exit strategy. We got to almost every market we would open with Amway, we would become their top selling product by dollar in volume. So, that I think that kind of made them a little nervous that they didn't own it. They like to own most of the things that they do. They like to own their brands.
How smart of them.
Yeah, right. They actually own from farm. They make a lot of supplements, so they own from the farms that they organically farm on, all the way through the supplements that they sell. They own a lot of manufacturing. That's always kind of been their model for more than 60 years. And so this was kind of outside their comfort zone a little bit. And they were just concerned. I'd been an Amway distributor. My partners had been Amway distributors, some of them. So they were just concerned, what was going on here? Were the distributors taking over the ship, or, how is this going to work? And after a point, they basically said to us, it was before actually our big Japanese launch in 2011. They said, if you're going to launch more markets, we're going to need an option agreement. It can be a long runway. We had a 7-year option, but we need an option agreement to buy you. And then if you do well, we'll accelerate that. And, so we had this plan in place since probably 2010, 2011. But but eventually it became kind of that was the direction we were on, the path we were on.
Not a bad path.
Yeah,
sure.
It worked out. Yeah, it was good.
Absolutely. I know that you stayed on after the company sold for, I don't know, 3 or 4, something like that, years. When Clay was selling his company, I know that was something that they were talking about as well, but there's usually some pluses and minuses that come along with that. How did that work out for you?
Well, it's always interesting, right? I mean, at least I knew the animal that I was going to be partnering with. It was a known quantity. I knew the people there. I sort of knew what I was getting into. And it was an interesting chapter in my life. I tend to not, I'm not typically looking for a long career path at a big corporate company. And Amway's over, roughly $8 to $10 billion. So they're, larger company, global. But we did really well partnering with them around the world. So I knew most of the players. I knew the people I was going to be working with. That part was not that hard. I did have to work there for 3 years as part of the earnout. And I guess the thing that was kind of interesting was that was one of the KPIs. And so the thing that was funny was some of the other people who knew that was going on had over/under bets whether or not I would make it 3 years, because we were a little more flexible, we were more entrepreneurial, and so at a big company that can be a little challenging, but it was good. I'd worked at big companies before, so it wasn't totally outside my wheelhouse, but it worked out really well. It was a great learning experience for me. I tend to view those things, more like, what can we learn from doing something that maybe we're not so comfortable with? Mm-hmm. Because it's usually where the opportunity is to change and grow. And I think that transformation, transforming yourself, absolutely, and hopefully helping other people transform themselves is maybe some of the more important work we can do in life. And that's how we become better. Absolutely. And so I'm always open to a learning experience.
It doesn't kill you, makes you stronger.
Or it just hurts you, but yeah.
I don't know if I ever told you, but I had a little experience with Amway myself.
Oh, you did?
Yes. I was brought on by one of the diamonds to be her makeup trainer and event. So I did many artistry events and did training sessions. And
Who'd you do that
I was an artistry distributor. I knew you'd ask me a question like that. It was probably 15 years ago, and her name is escaping me. But
from the West Coast?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, she lived in Laguna Niguel. Very cool.
There's some great stories there. There was a whole group that was just focused on weddings and artistry, because they've said, look, if we can really make someone, for most people, this is the day that they're going to be the most beautiful, that it matters the most. Mm-hmm. If you can help someone have a great experience there with the products, so there's a service tied to the product, then they'll never ask you how much it costs or any of those sorts of things, because it's just the one that makes them look the way they want to look. So I think it's money well spent to hire somebody who is an actual, makeup artist to help somebody figure out how to use, I think makeup that is pretty decent. Yeah, no, it was actually a very good product line, and I've worked for all the best. So I really enjoyed working for artistry. So in addition to being founder and CEO, you have a huge social media presence. I mean, you're a pretty mega public figure worldwide. How has social media changed the whole direct selling, social selling model? It's been a journey. We started in 2008 with Excess when Facebook was newer. At least from my point of view, it was newer, not brand new, but
Right.
it's just starting to hit mainstream. And really started playing with because we did we were very event driven. And so the question for us was, okay, if we're going to go host or sponsor a ski race in some remote part of Austria, how do we broadcast that and get a lot of engagement? How do we bring people along? For us, social media was always about including people in some fun activity or event that we were doing. And it got to the point, we were in 60 countries. And I was traveling, almost 10 months a year at the peak of it. As we were going to all these places, it was, how are we bringing people into these experiences that we're doing wherever we are and sharing it? And people, that became very popular. People liked to see where I was going, what I was doing, the parties we were throwing, the events we were doing, and the places we were doing them. And, it was almost like a travel log for a while. And so for us, it started out where it was very organic. You got to, if you built an audience, you got to reach the audience. I think over time, it got very frustrating for me because the more I built and invested, the more that those companies wanted to charge me to reach the audience that I effectively built for them, which I thought was, not as, it wasn't there wasn't the shared value that I was hoping for out of that, let's just say. And then lately, the thing that's been difficult for, I think, direct sellers is, direct sellers don't want people abusing the platform. They don't want people just out there trying to do transactions or sell or take advantage of a personal relationship in a way that would offend other people on the site. And so I think there's been a clamp down on how social selling can work with direct selling, with network marketing. The good thing for Excess is we sort of focused on our brand as a product and as a branded experience, and took people on that journey. And the whole concept of owning your own business or repping our drinks was always in the very distant background. It wasn't in the forefront of our conversations. So we never really had that blowback that I think the companies that are more opportunity driven get. But I think right now there's just a lot of questions around, how do I take advantage of social media with a brand, with a product, with a company? I'm involved in private equity with a group called RX3 Growth Partners, which is a celebrity investment organization. It's a private equity fund. And part of the benefit we bring is our celebrity or professional athlete investors agree that as part of their investment, they're actually going to promote the brands that we bring into our portfolio. And that's actually working fairly well. And we get access to much bigger deals than we'd ever be able to be a part of, and larger PE groups than we would normally be able to partner with because of that. But what we're seeing throughout all of the portfolio of direct-to-consumer companies we invest in, people like Manscaped, which you've heard of, or Mack Weldon, which is clothing, or Orgain, which you've seen, you've seen at
Love
Costco.
Orgain.
Yeah. We're in all those, largely through partnerships with larger third-party investors. They're all having to spend more and more money every year to reach the same audience size using social. And that sort of takes the fun and the allure out of DTC. I mean, it's still an important category. I think there's going
DTC.
to be direct to consumer. So companies that when we're investing today, I mean, it's great that they might have brick and mortar like Orgain is in Costco, and it's a great channel for them. But we also want to see that at least double-digit percentages of their customer base or their revenue base is in DTC, and that is growing in triple digits. So we want to see a hockey stick in their growth of direct-to-consumer marketing.
Well, and that fund has some rock star names, right? Like Danica Patrick,
yeah,
Ryan Sheckler. I was reading Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. Aaron was one of the founders of the fund. A personal friend of mine. He was the one that invited me to at a very early stage to invest. And it's funny, I love Aaron. He's super smart. Was just golfing with him last week here. But I typically wouldn't invest with athletes, not because I don't like athletes, but just because they're not professional investors typically.
Everybody's got to start somewhere, Dave.
They do. But the great thing was,
it's Roth Capital.
He did it really smartly. Yeah, he did it really wisely. He partnered with Roth Capital, Byron Roth Capital, which is a local investment bank. They do the Roth conference, big Roth. you said you've been invited many times and hadn't
I
gone.
wouldn't say many times. It's been a couple times, but for whatever reason, I'm always like out of town or
Doing
something happening.
fun.
I'm like, damn it, it's like the best party in town, and we got to plan around it.
Yeah, so he partnered with Roth, and they're very smart, and they're great at. They typically haven't been PE, but they've done a lot of investment banking, and so they were able to set up their own fund with Aaron. Nate Robbie is the lead for Roth that runs that fund. So it's kind of an independent fund that's part of the Roth family, and it just gives us access to a lot of incredible deals, and we've had a lot of success. I think I don't know if I can say how much we're up, but we're up very, very solid triple digits in our first couple of years. So it's been,
and it's just all consumer goods.
Yeah, it's yes, yeah. We don't invest in tech. We don't do like venture type investing. So we have, we tend to do later stage investments. We do small bet. Our fund is $50 million, so it's a smaller fund. Our bets are $3 to $5 million bets typically, but we tend to co-invest with multi-billion-dollar funds like the TSG Group or L Catterton or Cascadia. We'll co-invest with some of these larger funds in their deals where they're putting a huge bet in, like let's say, maybe in like a Core Power Yoga, they'd put in a multi-$100 million bet, and we'd put in a small, multi-million dollar
Everybody
bet.
wants to play with the cool kids.
It's if you go to Vegas, it helps to play with a big bank,
right?
Yeah.
No, super cool. Well, let's go back a little bit, because I always love to hear where people come from and what makes them tick. And I know you grew up in Michigan.
Yeah, primarily Michigan.
In the 70s.
Yeah.
Surfing Lake Michigan, apparently.
I did. Yeah, we made a movie called Unsalted, all about surfing the Great Lakes.
Which, I mean, maybe it's my California naivete, but I didn't know people surfed in lakes. I thought the waves weren't big enough, but apparently I stand corrected.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, remember that Gordon Lightfoot song, The Sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald, which is maybe not. I'm looking at your eyes glazing over. I probably wouldn't know about it except that I grew up on the lakes. But, it's about a 700-foot boat that sank in Lake Superior. There's tons of shipwrecks because they get, the violent storms that you think about, Kansas and, tornadoes. Those violent storms sweep across the Midwest, and then they hit that water and it just blows up. And so you can get some incredibly violent storms very quickly. And those generate big waves.
So, but when there's not a violent storm, is there still waves?
No. Yeah, it's got to be.
Wait till it's bad weather.
Yeah, it's usually like a storm front.
Oh.
And then, they cycle. So as they pass through, those storms will push offshore. And then maybe the last hour or so, surf will be kind of offshore.
I don't know how I would have felt like about that as a mom. I would have been like, kids, get your booties back in here. I don't know where you're going out in a storm.
Yeah, I mean, we grew up on a lake and we had a lot of boats, and we raced sailboats growing up. It's kind of my dad's passion. And we raced these really fast scows. And then my brother and I, kind of in the early 80s, we kind of transitioned into windsurfing, which was becoming more popular then. And it was still like buoy racing. It was kind of racing, course racing.
Is windsurfing the same as kite surfing?
Different. There wasn't kite surfing then.
Oh, okay.
So kites are just, there's two strings with a kite you're flying, basically, right? Windsurfing has a mast and a boom and everything. But so we did really well windsurfing at younger ages than most people. A lot of people were in their 20s. And I was like probably 13 or something. My brother was just driving. And so we would go to these races. We were racing offshore on these windsurfers in really rough conditions. And often you'd blow something out, like your universal, which connects the mast to the board. And then you'd end up having to paddle your board for like miles. And I just remember, now I look back at it, it seemed normal back then. But we're out in like thunder and lightning, and, we'd see water spouts, and not regularly, but you'd see them from time to time. And I was just thinking about it the other day. I'm like, what were my parents doing? I think they trusted us because we had been on the water so much. We grew up in boats so much that, whether we were in our sailboats or on our windsurfers, it wasn't like, I think for them, it was like, oh, they're just out on the lake.
Yeah. And they have each other.
Yeah. What could happen? But we always came home. So it was good growing up having, I think, that level of action and kind of excitement, because it makes some of the more exciting things that happen now seem less scary, I guess.
Well, and water has been a huge part of your life. I mean, when I read your articles, and most of the things I've seen published from you have some kind of relationship to water.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's my thing. I sort of need to get in the water every day. I call it getting your gills wet, but like it's just, there's a part of me that just, I'm not happy unless I've been doing a lot of cold water swimming lately, and it's just another angle to have fun getting wet and push myself, challenge myself, do something new.
Until something goes wrong with your ears.
Yeah, I had to get my ears chiseled from so many decades of cold water exposure.
So how does cold water make things build up in your ear? I don't quite understand.
Yeah,
is that barnacles or what's going on?
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's fortunately there's no creatures, but it's there's a bony growth if your body's trying to protect your eardrum, and it's getting all this exposure to cold wind and water, and so eventually some people get this, and I don't know the exact percentage, but it's a fairly high percentage of people. And I'd been putting it off. My ears were both about 90% closed, and I could hear okay, but you trap water in your ear and you get a lot of ear infections when that happens. And so anyway, I finally went and found they used to cut behind your ear, cut behind your ear, peel it back, and then drill it. And that was a long recovery process. They have a new process now that's better, where they basically they have these small chisels, and they chisel the bone out of your ear. And it's a fairly quick healing process. It's a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks, and you're back in the water. But yeah, I posted some things about that.
I know it was
a little disgusting.
It looked scary. It was like, oh no.
I posted the picture of how much bone they took out, which was quite a bit. And part of the reason I did that is because a lot of guys my age, in their late 40s or 50s, start to need to get this surgery.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of chatter about, should I get it? Should I not get it? Will it come back? And when I went and finally did it, I was like, actually, this isn't that bad. Like, it's a fairly painless procedure. You just use ibuprofen. You don't even have to use any of the narcotics to get off of the pain. So it's a pretty quick process, and they seem to be okay now.
Good. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Dave?
I can hear you. Yeah. No, I think it's good.
In some of your writings, you also talk about losing your brother. He was a Navy SEAL, and
two different people. So I lost my brother, who was like a year and a half older than me, and then I also lost a guy who was like my best friend, my brother, who was a Navy SEAL. Yeah, okay. Mark Mitherell.
I'm putting the two together.
Yeah, and a couple things I've kind of woven what it's like to lose a brother, because they're both like brothers to me. So it probably was a little confusing, but
that's a lot of loss.
Yeah, I think I lost my older brother to leukemia when I was 20. He was 26 and I was 23. Is that right? Maybe 25 and 23. And then my college roommate, who was the reason I moved to Laguna Beach, Mark Mitherell, he was this guy who pre-med and English Lit double major, worked his buns off in college. We had a lot of fun, but he worked hard. And he didn't get into the medical school he wanted to get into. And so he decided, he tells me eventually that, I think I'm going to go to the Navy SEALs, and I think I'm going to go and enlisted. And I was like, excuse me? And he had discovered, he did some research, he figured out that if you go in as an officer, you don't get the same number of missions, you don't get the adventure, you don't get the skills. And that's really why he was going in. So he decided to go and enlisted, was a Navy SEAL at Team 7 and Team 5, was outstanding in his class. And he was recruited into kind of the Super Bowl of special forces later. A lot of ex-Delta, or what they call Cagers now, from the Army, a lot of ex-Dev Group, which is like what we think of as SEAL Team 6, kind of the elite of the elite. And this was even like another level that you could get recruited into during Afghanistan and Iraq. And so you get all the toys, very little oversight. You had missions and you had performance you had to deliver against. But sort of if you're in that line of work, it's what you really want. And he was effectively training the Lines of Mesopotamia, which was the Iraqi special forces, and training a lot of the Afghani special forces. And part of that work is you have to lead them. You have to show them by example, and you lead from the front. And he ended up getting blown up in a massive, probably Iranian IED in 2008, going into a solder city at the wee hours of the morning for a high-profile pickup. And Yeah, so it was funny because just before that, I'd been talking to him, and I said, you sure you want to keep doing this? Like, we're not getting younger, and it's getting pretty hot over there. And he and his wife Sarah just adopted a new daughter, and he said, look, I love my wife and I love my daughter, but he goes, I've been training my whole life to do this. This is exactly what I'm made to do. And and so there's, was it risky? Yeah. Do we wish he was still here? Of course. Was he probably doing what he was built and supposed to do? I think so.
Well, and I brought that up because when we lose people that are close to us, it makes us have to take a step back and kind of like analyze our life and the purpose of life and how does that change you? Obviously you lost two people very close, two brothers.
Yeah. And I guess they were roughly maybe 15 years apart. I think the first one, when I lost my older brother, who I grew up fighting with every day and partying with, and, also really close, there's a point where I think it's hard, most of us don't really think we're ever going to die. We try and avoid that thought, right? I mean, I know conceptually we know it, but in any real way, it doesn't really hit home for a lot of us. For me, it didn't. We were doing a lot of things that could have very easily killed us, especially at that age, when you're 18 to 20 or 15 to 20. We'd ski, we'd go to Taos and ski the chutes. We'd race windsurfers and, with water spouts, and we'd lose sight of each other's masts and the swells. I mean, it was, I think we managed the risk fairly well, and we didn't die doing that. But when he died from something that was just kind of arbitrary, that really stuck with me that, and let's just say he was a better actor than I was. Like, I was kind of the black sheep, and he was like the kid who did everything kind of right. So when the fact that he kind of got nailed by this kind of random disease and I didn't, it just puts a lot of questions through your head. And I think one of the things that it kind of made me focus on was, every day is a gift. There are no guarantees, and you kind of have to make every day count, which to me kind of I translate into you have to live deliberately. And so the question starts to become, you're not waiting for what's going to come, because if you just wait for what's going to come, could be leukemia.
Right.
You kind of have to go figure out what you want, and then try and make it real. Yeah. And you got to fail a lot, and you get used to failing, but it's a lot better than dying. And I think it kind of put a lot of things in perspective for me, and helped me kind of focus on maybe more of what I wanted and what mattered.
It's, coming out of the 2020 experience, we see how certain people can take lemons and make lemonade, and some of us are just not as good cut out at doing that. And so I always like to hear how you're a very positive person, and you're a very move forward person, and yet you've had some really big obstacles that have hit you in life. And some people just use those as a reason just to stop or to, feel sorry for themselves. And so I love hearing people's stories of how it's pushed them forward, because that's, I think, the best thing that we can do. You're obviously an accomplished author, speaker, numerous published articles, books, films, podcasts. Which of your publishing projects are you most proud of?
There's an essay I wrote for Sojourners, a long essay about my experience in...
God, I read so much of your stuff, and I didn't read that one.
That's
Who knew?
okay. No,
you should have started.
That's okay. It's there's an article I wrote for Sojourners about my experience in the Kiev revolution in 2014. So we were launching XS in Ukraine. We'd been planning it in 2013 when I was living over in Munich. And there started to be a lot of unrest in Ukraine. It was tied to the EU trying to partner with the Ukraine to help them with anti-corruption measures and to give them loans to kind of work their way out. And then Russia coming in and doubling down and offering twice as much, lower interest. Of course, now you're tied to Russia. So it kind of depends what you want. And they ended up having a lot of student unrest and then big protests. And by the time we were launching in March 2014, by February, Maidan, which is in the center of this big center square in Kiev, had over 100,000 people living in it, protesting, big encampments, big barricades. If you've seen Les Miserables, where they're manning the barricades in Paris, it was just like that. It ended up in the end of February, Yanukovych was the president. He fled. The Russians sent in snipers who murdered dozens of people in the square, and then they took over Crimea. And so I was told not to go into Ukraine because there
Probably by very smart people.
Exactly. It was sage advice. There was no government. There were no police. There were hooligans effectively running the government at the time, meaning like violent soccer gangs, which in Europe is a thing. And so I said to our staff, I said, well, are we still going to have the launch event in Ukraine? And they said, yes. And I said, will Ukrainians be driving effectively across civil war to come to this launch event? And they said, yes. And I said, well, then if they're willing to go, I think we have to be willing to go. At Amway, our 4 kind of values on the wall are freedom, family, hope, and reward. And I said, if, the reason we do this is to help people get financial freedom. We don't tell them how to vote. We don't tell them we don't tell them about the higher freedoms. Mm-hmm. I think there's economic freedom, then there's social freedom, political freedom, and religious freedom. Those are kind of the highest freedoms. How can you control earning enough to feed yourself? Who do you associate with? It's the second highest freedom, I think. Third highest freedom would be who do you get to vote for to be in power? And I think the highest one is what do you worship? We're all going to worship something. Mm-hmm. You should be able to freely choose what that is. Yeah. And so I think the idea for me was, well, if they're all willing to come across this country to get together to celebrate, there's 10,000 people, I think I need to go, or we have to take freedom off the wall. If freedom is our value, we either have to support it, especially when it's scary, especially when it hurts us. Mm-hmm. We have to take it down.
So I went. It's convenient, huh?
Yeah, we had this big launch. It was very successful. And I wrote an article about it. A friend of mine on social media saw that I was there, and he said, what are you doing selling sodas in a revolution? Mm-hmm. And I kind of laughed. I kind of knew where it was coming from. And I said, well, I'm sure this looks a little strange. But, I'm not here because I need the money. I'm not here because I'm worried about the success of the drink sale per se. Mm-hmm. I'm here because we're trying to help people in Ukraine get their own right to self-determination, make enough money to feed themselves where they don't have to rely on Putin or the EU to bail them out, where they can bail themselves out. And then they can figure the rest out. That's up to them. I'm not here to tell them who to associate with, who to vote for, or what to worship. I'm here to help them get the money piece sorted so they can focus on those other things. And so that was what the article was about, and it had a lot of kind of very interesting images from, I'd never been through a revolution before. And it was, and then Russia had come in and was taking over Crimea. And, the first thing to do is shut down an airport. And so our concern was that they would keep coming and take down Kiev, because that's the main city and it's in the center of Ukraine. So I had to have a go bag and a car ready so we could hightail it 6 hours to the Romanian border and try and get over the mountains into Romania if the Russians kept coming our direction. So that was an exciting one. It was scary. It was fun. But to me, that was one of the most meaningful ones, because it was where I really had to put these core values on the line, where it had to actually, I had to bet something. And the bet paid off. And it was, long-term, Ukraine's kind of a mess right now because of the civil war that's been going on. But I think the people that I met, the relationships that we had, the business that we created together was all very successful at that time. And it was just a great learning experience in global, how things can go wrong globally that you might not expect if you're just living in the U.S.
It's so funny you should say that. We literally just had a guest last week on his way to Russia to launch a big part of a new business venture. And the Russian revolutionaries were out and about. And so they had to basically stop their trip. But they had a celebrity going with them, and they were just worried about the celebrity's ability to get in and out with, crazy things going on. But yeah, it's interesting how when your business becomes a global business, all of the different aspects, is if we don't have enough crap as small business people to have to deal with, but then global issues can certainly come in and really shake it up. I wanted to read an excerpt because there was something that I read that was so beautiful. You're a very poetic writer.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Delphine.
This was from an article that you published in the Huffington Post. It said, so on Saturday, I decided to head out on a solo freediving tour of Brooks and Crest Street reefs. It is where I find my communion of the saints, where I meet my brothers who have passed beyond the veil, in water and in spirit. It is my meditation, my superstition, and my personal spiritual belief. What do you mean by the reefs being your personal spiritual belief?
Well, I think, I was raised in a kind of a Christian, conservative, Protestant environment where our ethnicity is like Dutch Christian reforms. Our ethnicity is tied up in our faith, tied up in our culture. It's all kind of wound together. As you get older and you travel and you meet a lot of people from all over the world who have their own culture tied up in their faith, you start to, I think, naturally question whether this is the only one, or maybe everybody has different paths, hopefully to the same truth. And assuming that people believe there is a universal truth, there's a lot of givens in that statement. But for me, I do sort of believe that, at a minimum, the universe is moving in a direction, right? There was a Big Bang or creation event, whatever people want to call it, and out of that, as far as we can tell, using radio telescopes on satellites, that our universe is constantly expanding. It's moving off in a direction. We're sitting still right now, but this planet is literally moving at 70,000 miles an hour off into space, right? And so, or our galaxy is. So if you think about that, it's like we're sitting on the Starship Enterprise, and who knows where we're going. But I think it is moving in a direction. I think there is something happening. And so for me, it's not about being inside four walls in a building and having the right magic words or the right book. It's more about seeing that cosmic truth around us all the time. And I love the metaphor of surfing because, when you start spending a lot of time in big violent storms, you realize you're never going to go head to head with that storm. You have to learn how to dance with it, how to wrestle with it, how to harness it. And so for me, I think that's part of the reason water is so special for me, because you can literally feel the energy that came out of a storm thousands of miles away, and you get to dance with it. You get to surf with it. You get to body surf. You get to dive. And so participating in that energy and that power, learning how to sort of, I guess dance is one word, or surf with it, has always kind of been something where I feel like there's this visceral connection to this energy in the universe, where you literally get to touch it, taste it, feel it, smell it, all those sorts of things. And when I'm out in the water, that deep magic of that energy, I feel like I reconnect with, maybe some of my brothers who've gone before me, because that's where we spent a lot of time. With Mark, I lived on Brook Street, surfed all over Southern California and different parts of the world. And with my brother, sailing and windsurfing and surfing and diving, same thing. So just feel like when I'm in that space, when you're sort of isolated and alone and there's all that immense power, it kind of makes you realize there's a lot bigger things in the universe than you. And it connects you, I think, back to maybe some of the people who maybe have left us, or at least on the other side of a veil that we can't experience right now.
I love that. Which leads us right into our big questions.
Yeah, the big questions.
Big questions. Dave, do you have any daily habits, any daily routines?
I do. I think that's part of living deliberately, right? We have to kind of start the day intentionally and hopefully stick to it intentionally. I like to get up and do some movements first thing, like kind of just do some stretching. I'm getting older, so things hurt in the morning.
You are?
Yeah, right. So I try and keep things moving. I love doing some stretching. I love meditation. I've been doing the Wim Hof method, which is pretty fun. There's different types of breathing meditations, and I don't think there's a perfect one, but this is one where you're over oxygenating your system, and then you're decreasing the amount of CO2, and so it's a combination of like 40 breaths and then a long breath hold followed by a short breath hold, and then you go back into the 40 breaths. And it's kind of amazing. You can have hallucinations when you're doing it. There's all sorts of things that happen that are pretty unusual. You get not tinnitus, you get tetany, which is when your hands and your feet can kind of cramp up even. Sounds painful.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, no, but it gives you this, it's really one of these meditation practices where, particularly on the breath hold, I'll hold my breath sometimes now for, over 5 minutes. And the process of that requires you to not focus on your body screaming at you that you're out of air, that maybe you need air or you need to breathe. You have to kind of change the conversation with your head. And I think that's healthy for fear. I think that's healthy for being out of breath. I think it's healthy for, people who are suffering other things, PTSD, alcoholism, whatever it is. we don't have to be a reaction. We don't have to just react to our environment or to what our body's telling us, what our brain's telling us. We can actually take a step back and we can make a decision about how we want to behave or who we want to be. And so I like to start there, because if I jump out of bed and look at my phone, or jump out of bed and turn on my computer, my day is just going to be a series of reactions. Mm-hmm. And if I can start my day deliberately, if I can get my body moving, if I can kind of get control of my morning, get control of what I want my day to be, it will probably get wildly spun off course. But at least I have that control in the morning. I have this idea, this plan when I start, and I'll probably get further down that plan than if I hadn't. And so that's my typical morning routine. I also like to get in the ocean first thing if I have time. I like to go. I've been doing free diving in trunks. It's in the cold water. It's part of the Wim Hof method, and that's been pretty remarkable. It just helps a lot with inflammation. It's another way to have this conversation with your body. Yeah. It's screaming at you, telling you it's really cold, and you're saying that's okay. We're gonna enjoy this anyways, and eventually you do. So it's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I got into meditation just this past year, where I'm doing it on a daily, and I'm so loving my morning meditation. Like, the day just doesn't even go as well if I don't have that. So I really look forward to it now, which is great, because it was before, it was like, I probably should be doing that meditation thing. Stick with it, people. I promise you, it gets better.
Yeah, I mean, the only secret is you got to do the meditation.
Yeah.
What are you doing? What's your practice?
I started with guided meditation, because that was kind of what was helping me overcome that feeling that I just couldn't clear my mind. And then I got into the Silva method, which is active meditation.
Oh, cool.
Jose Silva, transformative. I mean, it just changed my life.
When you say active, like, are you doing a walking meditation, or what kind of thing?
No, it's you're done in a relaxed pose, but it's where you use techniques to use your thinking. So you do 3 scenes techniques or video imaging techniques, and it's where you use your mind to be creative and manifest what you want. So it's not quite the same idea of clearing when you go into that meditative state, but you use the mind to be more productive.
So you're focusing on some things.
On some, cool. Manifestations. And it just has worked amazing for me. And I really have been able to reach much deeper levels of meditation. I found it through Mind Valley Academy, which I'm a huge, huge fan of, and Loken Vishiani. So recommend it.
Very cool.
Now, but what about for business though? Because I mean, a lot of people now are getting into, we're starting to see really in the work world that people are using, affirmations or vision boards or techniques that are more aligning groups and thinking around business. Do you use any techniques to help you with your success in business?
Yeah, I mean, I work with almost a volunteer army, right? So we have distributors that I work with, and then we have staff that we work together. And those are you have two different types of people that you're kind of working together with. So there's a couple things that I like to do. One is I like to align on a vision. Where are we headed together? And then how does that break down into a mission? What are we going to do?
Yeah. And
then what are our roles, and how are we going to measure ourselves? What are our tasks in order to make that happen? And to me, particularly when you're dealing with higher performing humans, people who can kind of think broadly, think across an enterprise, or think about the broader goal and how they play into it, it tends to give them purpose.
Yeah.
They know why they're doing it, and they know why what they do matters. And they know that if they don't deliver on their task, it impacts all these other things that have to occur. Mm-hmm. And so I think it kind of gels people to work together to want to help other people succeed so that we can all win as a team. And then I think the biggest thing is just constant communication and staying on top of, remember what the vision is, remember what the mission is. Now, what are your tasks and when they need to be done? How are we doing against those tasks in that time frame? Are you going to be on time so the rest of us can accomplish our tasks and goals, or do we need to make adjustments? And so, I wouldn't say we use a vision board per se, but we use a lot of tools. We use Reich, which is a project management tool. I love using expectation agreements with people that I work with. This is where I think we're headed. This is what your role in that mission. This is what I'm expecting from you. What do you need from me in order for you to be successful? And by the way, why are you here? Where do you want to go? What are your long-term goals of this organization? And how can I help you get those done? Because if I view my job not as a boss to tell people what to do, but as a leader to help people, understand where we're going, make sure that they're aligned, and then help them meet their goals at the organization, whether they're distributors or whether they're staff or whomever it is. People are just generally happier. They're typically more excited. And if they don't like that and can't get along with that, they're probably the wrong people.
Yeah.
We need to help them go work for one of our competitors so they can ruin that company.
Oh my God. Tell me something that people would be surprised to know about you.
I got kicked out of college for a poem.
That seems like a bad college. Did it have...
It was a very conservative school. My parents would only pay for Christian colleges. And it was the best Christian, or one of the best Christian colleges that exist. But they were just very conservative. And, there were a lot of good reasons they could have kicked me out. They happened to pick sort of a dumb one. And I think it was the one they could catch me at because my name was on it. So I had a poem published in an underground student paper that had some sexual innuendo. It was about surfing, and it's kind of based on an E.E. Cummings poem, I think called She Being Young, but it's all about this guy test driving. The imagery is about a guy test driving a car, but it's connecting back to, let's just say having a test drive with a special lady friend.
There you go.
And the school wasn't terribly fond that I published that, and they used that to kick me out. But it became a national news story. We had a big protest about it and ended up helping me get a really nice internship at the American Enterprise Institute, which was very competitive. So I
helped you get some test drives?
Maybe. Yeah, there were not a lot of test drives at Wheaton College, unfortunately. they had very limited selection.
Oh, lucky Sarah. Tell me something that you used to believe but you don't anymore.
Well, I used to believe, and it's kind of funny. I used to believe that, a lot of things. I used to believe that if you didn't say the magic prayer, that you would go to hell, and that hell was like this sort of real fiery brimstone sort of place. And I really don't believe either of those things anymore. I don't think most of the Christian theologians believed it either. I helped Rob Bell. He wrote a book called Love Wins that was very popular. Put him at odds with a lot of fundamentalists, which is a very small subsection of Christianity. And I helped him do this follow-up book called The Love Wins Companion Guide. And I ended up, we did a lot of in-depth research with major Christian thinkers, some living, some dead. And it became really clear that this is not an idea that actually originates in the Bible. This is an idea that was developed over time to probably control people. If you want to sell fire insurance, you better have a fire.
Yeah.
And keep people in the pews. And it's been very unhealthy, I think. It's been kind of very traumatic for a lot of people. So that was like a very eye-opening, healthy
How does your parents feel about that revelation?
Well, I think so my parents actually read through this whole thing, and I think they generally agree. I think there's a lot, like C.S. Lewis is a famous Christian author who had similar beliefs. He wrote a book called The Problem of Pain, and chapters 8 and 10 of that book are very, very similar to what Rob wrote about. But I don't think people really took it fully seriously. And I think when Rob wrote it, he was a little more direct in a way, and also raised a lot more questions. And so it kind of brought a lot of attention onto these questions, and it was really fun for me because it's fun to discover something and then find out a lot of other people are discovering it and be part of that conversation. But yeah, that was a good one. I used to think it was bad to be gay quite a while ago. Not bad. No, like I never disliked gay people. I just thought, oh, that's too bad. I don't think that anymore. I think it's okay to be gay. I think it's great to be gay if you're supposed to be gay.
Yeah.
And I think, we're just discovering that you can be a whole lot of things, trying to keep up with it now.
Yeah.
Is it a throuple? Are you gay? Or what pronoun do you use? So it's a confusing and enlightening time at the same time right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I agree with you on all of those counts. So, woohoo.
What do you have one?
You're not supposed to do that, Dave. I probably have a lot of them. And I think one of the ones that I have was about kind of thinking that where you started is where you were going to be. And I think I've changed to understand that your direction of your life is based basically on what your intention is. And that, you don't need to react to life. You can actually direct life. And my life has become really beautiful once I understood that small change of thinking. So yeah, I think I've changed a lot in that way. Let's talk about your latest endeavor, because you've got some fun stuff coming up. Now, coming from the direct selling world, 20-year veteran, some incredible amount of time.
Yeah, probably roughly 20 years.
I mean,
I'm coming up on 20. I'm probably, just shy of that.
I'm sure you had your choice of not only any direct selling company that you would want to work for, but probably any company you'd want to work for. So what makes it work so lucky to get Dave Vanderveen?
Well, yeah, I hope they are. It's, it's a weird category. It's a very unusual industry, direct selling, which people call multi-level marketing or network marketing too. And, and part of the problem is there have been abusive companies or abusive people in those categories, like any category.
Yeah.
There's abusive doctors, there's abusive attorneys, there's abusive, pick your category. It's people. Some people will choose to do bad things. Right. So I think the direct selling industry has done a poor job of telling its story. So I guess for me, one of the things that brought me back to it after we sold Access, after I left Amway, was Byron Roth had helped New Age, where I was last year, raise quite a bit of money, I think over $100 million, and really needed to clean up that business. And so he had asked me if I would go help them. I also had some clauses that didn't let me go to a pure direct seller from my Amway contract. So I went and helped them, and we did a lot of work there. COVID hit, a lot was happening, but we were able to clean that business up, merge with another one, double the business, it was a public company, double the share value for the shareholders, leave the distributors, I think, in a better place. So that was really healthy. And one of the companies I had been talking to was ItWorks, and that founder, Mark Pentecost, has owned it now for 20 years. Former basketball coach from West Michigan. We have some similar roots, so it was an interesting guy to talk to. But they're probably best in class in the industry at generating new customers. They have a high percentage customer to distributor ratio. Some of these businesses, people are just buying to qualify, which is frowned on by the FTC. The idea is we don't just want people playing poker, just taking the money they have to the game and then spreading it around. We want, we actually want to create wealth, meaning we want to be exchanging value with people outside that circle in order to grow the business and bring more money into the business. And so I loved it that they had, I think, 2/3 to 3/4 of their revenue comes from customers. They have a very young distributor base. I snuck into one of their events just before COVID to see what they were doing. And it was a very young, hip distributor base that was using TikTok and Instagram to drive their business. So they were digitally savvy, young, fun. And their portfolio was just killer. It was, they had started with a body wrap, which I thought was a little odd. And they literally call it the crazy wrap. But, people get pretty remarkable results. It changed the shape of their body, helps them lose weight.
Yeah, I was reading about that.
Yeah.
It reduces tightness and firmness and cellulite reduction and everything, and I've been in the beauty business for a long time and I haven't seen that before. So ready to try it.
They have some great transformational before and afters, but that's become only 10%. It's a small percentage of our business now. It's about 10% of our business. Most of the business transitioned when the founder, Mark, had gotten sick and gotten a rare type of cancer. The business really dropped off. It had been centered around him. And his family really stepped in. His daughter, Kinsey, became the CMO. They really sped up the new product release timeframe from 2 years down to 6 months, and then really transformed the portfolio where it was focused on weight loss tied to intermittent fasting and ketogenic diets, and some other tools. There's a fat burner.
Such a popular trend right now.
Yeah, and that was the thing when I looked at their portfolio and I looked at the things we were investing in RX3. It was really similar types of products.
You might actually be having a niche.
Well, we were at, like at RX3, we're in Super Coffee, which is one of the fastest growing keto coffee brands right now. We're in we're in some of the super greens and super red products, and we're in super greens and super reds, both at It Works. So I was saying, look, this portfolio is exactly what I would invest in. This distributor base is exactly what you look for and is really hard to find. They already have the bulk of their business coming from customers. And I have this thesis that direct selling businesses are really undervalued based on the amount of revenue they generate and the profitability compared to DTC. So a DTC company will get a much higher multiple if you're going to sell it than you would get on a direct selling company. Almost maybe 3 to 4 times as much. They're not nearly as profitable either. And so part of what I'm working on right now, and what my belief is, that if we blur the lines between what's direct selling and what's DTC, because we're both effectively doing the same thing, we're both trying to reach a customer directly. So if we're both using digital marketing, if we're both using direct-to-consumer tools, we're both using similar portfolios. If the only real difference is that we have much higher touch with a distributor base, then why wouldn't we get the same values? And there's a number of PE firms that are very interested in that thesis and are very interested in that idea. And so when I went to New Age...
Anybody can sell them, it's you, Dave.
Well, when I went to New Age, they were doing omnichannel. So they were in retail, they were in bricks and mortar, and they were doing direct selling with different brands and different products. This is much more aligned with where I think the big opportunity is, which is, let's do it here first. Let's show that we can take It Works and get a DTC valuation, protecting our distributors through that process, giving them a better opportunity through that process. And then let's find more companies that we can make that transition with, out of direct selling into more of a blended direct selling DTC. That's a huge value proposition. And there's a lot of business waiting to make that transition that I hope to be a part of. And that's kind of the financial, strategic part of the interest there. But I think more importantly, one of the things I got to be a part of with XS and Amway was helping people all over the world transform their lives, economically, and then watch where they took it, socially, politically, spiritually, and then also just physically. I mean, when you actually get people living a lifestyle of, moving and eating differently, which we might call diet and exercise, which are kind of taboo words in my opinion. But this idea of, instead of just talking about diet and exercise, let's talk about changing our lifestyle. It's just more fun to do 2 or 3 sports in a day. It's just more fun if you feel great after you eat a meal, rather than your body's hating you because you ate all the wrong things. And once you start to, I think, feel that transformation, see it in your life, see it in other people's lives. I mean, I think it starts at home, and then you share it with other people to lead by example there. But once you start doing that deliberately, you live deliberately, you have these better results in your life because of it, you share it with other people, you see it in their lives, it just becomes addictive. I mean, I sort of think, humans are sort of the only animals that can deliberately invest in another animal without looking for something back. I mean, there are symbiotic relationships in nature, but they're unintended. I think we have this, cerebral cortex. We can actually make a rational decision. We don't just have to react to everything, getting back to meditation. And when we deliberately invest, when we deliberately create value, when we deliberately help somebody transform in a way that they want to transform, I think that's why we're here. I was talking to a friend this morning in Denmark. And we were talking about some of these things. And he said, well, why are you here now? You don't have to work for money anymore. You could be surfing all day. And I said, well, I still like to surf. But, at the end of the day, purpose has to sort of matter, or you just become lost. And I think the reason, I actually love the existentialists. So I love like Camus and Sartre and some of these. And if, after World War II, when in Europe, the universe just seemed utterly meaningless, Camus was one of the people who said, and I'm just going to paraphrase him, but, he said, look, don't look for meaning in the universe. Our opportunity as human beings is to put meaning into a universe that might seem meaningless otherwise. And so I actually think those are pretty good words to live by. Don't wait for the universe to give you something. Don't wait for the universe to drop something in your lap. Please don't buy lottery tickets. That's not a model for how the world should work. Live deliberately. Put your intention into the universe. Put your effort into the universe. Try and create meaning out there and see if value comes back. Because if you've done something that's ultimately worth doing, value will come back. People will recognize it. People will want more of it. And they'll trade you some value for the value you're putting out there. And I think that living by that grace and by that generosity shows that you actually believe you are living in a generous universe, that there is hopefully a power that rewards that, whatever people want to call that.
Yeah. I think you get rewarded every day.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dave, it's been an awesome pleasure to have you on in my circle. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. I'm sorry it wasn't easier, but I'm very happy that you were persistent and you helped me get here.
Yes,
Thank
I'll
you.
take what I can get.